Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the YouTube audiobook series for The Snake and the Rose, written by Abby Matthias. I am Darius, and today I'll be introducing Chapter 19, Hellish Behavior. If you missed the last chapter, go ahead and go back to it. Unless it's too triggering, then you can continue with this one. I know last chapter was a pretty rough one. I should especially know. But anyhow, if you're all caught up and wanting to move on, here is Chapter 19, Hellish Behavior. Darius, I summon you now.
Satan announced as his voice echoed within my room. I stared at Darius and saw him growing panicked as he cried, "No, no, no!" And within an instant, he disappeared without a trace. "Darius?" I cried back. It didn't take long to figure out where he went. There was only one other place he could have gone besides being up here next to me. I knew that exact environment he was summoned to, especially after what happened to me earlier today. Satan dragged Darius down to his office in hell for another stupid reason. Why couldn't he just leave us alone? He already did enough damage to Darius today. Not only that, but he has put my protector demon through torment for 13 years. Was he ever going to be satisfied with Darius's suffering? As I reflected, I stood in the guinea pig room helpless on what to do. My brain started thinking about some of the worst scenarios that could happen. More sexual violations, abuse, or even physical torture. I hated my mind as it flooded with bad ideas and panic. I wanted to do something to help him and figure out what was going on. So I decided to try and call out to Darius. "Darius, can you hear me? Please answer me!" Sadly, I was left with no response as I continued to worry about the hellish behavior Satan would bestow on Darius.
As I abruptly landed from the sudden teleportation, I stumbled and lost my balance. I flailed my arms around to fix my equilibrium and stop myself from falling. I managed to do so, but I also saw Satan was sitting on the front of his desk staring at me intently. I took a note of the smirk on his face, and I wanted to smack it right off. I knew why the sick bastard was smiling. However, I knew I wasn't going to win that fight if I did so. So upon that thought, I decided to stay in place as he started the conversation. So tell me, Darla, how's it going being Miss Pretty Thing?
"You twisted pervert! You know how it's going!"
I said, aggravated. Oh yes, I definitely know. I do have to say though, I quite enjoy how uncomfortable this makes you. But that's not the only thing that brings me joy. Every change about you has benefited me in ways I didn't even think were possible. For example, those indescribable moans that came out of your mouth earlier. That was hot and was satisfying to listen to. At that moment, I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. Burn alive, hang myself, all the above. My stomach wanted to hurl up the lunch I ate, but yet it couldn't. This man got pleasure from this afternoon's episode and listened attentively to all of it. Well, of course he did. He was sadistic to the highest degree, and I wanted nothing to do with him. My arms wrapped around my stomach, hoping it would settle down. I truly was starting to feel nauseous as he continued speaking. But I do have to say, I have good taste in women. Those boobs and ass suit you very nicely, don't you think?
"Absolutely not!"
I yelled, protesting. In frustration, he stood up and placed his hands in his pants pockets. Oh, come on, Darla. Why do you never lighten up? Not even my relaxation session could help you.
"What is the matter with you? Everything you are doing is sickening. This isn't who I am, and you know it. I am a man.
What do you mean? A curvy woman with a nice rack shouldn't request something like that.
I'm only a woman because you made me one.
Damn straight. And I just might keep you that way because of how much better you look.
You had no right to change me. I did nothing wrong, and I refuse this unneeded cruelty.
You can refuse all you want, but that isn't going to change anything. You're not the one with the power here. I am. With that statement out in the open, Satan took advantage of his abilities and flung me against the wall. The wind was somewhat knocked out of my lungs as I regained my focus. I kept an eye on the monster in front of me as I tried walking forward to remove myself from the wall. Yet, I felt the instant restraint as I tried moving my arms. Looking up and struggling, my wrists were being held by his blue force, which made me immobilized. I was stuck in place for the moment, almost dreading what other dastardly plans Satan has up his sleeves. As I maneuvered my head to face forward again, he walked and placed himself in front of me as he extended his arm out to lean on the wall. His head tilted down as he displayed his heinous smile and lustful eyes while I gazed back in disgust and agitation. It isn't very nice of you to look at me like that, he said with his smirk widening into a crooked smile. If you really need to, I could give you another relaxing session like before. I quickly turned my face away, holding back throw up while feeling the anger rise in my chest. I didn't want to aggravate him and have that happen again, yet I was so fed up with his shenanigans. Despite the way I was feeling, I suddenly felt him bring his hand underneath my thigh and lift it up rapidly. Upon that action, I quickly turned my head to blurt out, but he talked before I could. Only this time, it could be for real. And with that, I had enough. I caught him off guard and took control of my leg to knee him in his repulsive nether region. He instantly backed up upon impact and held the area to prevent further injury. He grew furious by my defiance and used his power to lift me off the ground while stretching my arms above my head till they hurt. Now, I really couldn't go anywhere or defend myself. I was forced to face this monstrosity of a being, no matter how much I despised it. You little promiscuous floozy! You'll be lucky I don't kill you for that!
I don't care. Go ahead. I am still more of a man than you will ever be, no matter how many times you change me or my gender. At least I don't rely on my powers to manipulate and intimidate others. You're just a coward.
I said, no longer having a filter. After my truth spilled out of my mouth, he used his power again to stretch my arms more. I felt the muscles and tendons extending to their limits as they felt on the verge of tearing. I clenched my eyes and teeth tight from the intense pain, but refrained from vocalizing as I continued to be tortured.
My mind was flooded with fears and worries about Darius being summoned to Satan. He could be experiencing horrible trauma while I was helplessly stuck within the human world. At this moment, I couldn't do anything for him. I was only human, like he said. My breathing became rapid with every second as I emotionally panicked. My body was shaken a little by this turn of events, but I was more emotionally affected by this unexpected circumstance. However, out of the blue, I suddenly developed a headache as a voice echoed loudly within my head.
You're just a recreant boy hiding behind your powers. A child throwing a temper tantrum because life isn't going your way. A selfish devil that will do anything to get what you want, no matter how childish you act. No wonder no one likes you.
Darius, I can hear you! Hello? I called back, dying for a response. I wanted to know what was happening. Sadly, though, it never came. All I knew was that if he was talking like that, Satan was not happy. As time dragged on, my eyes began to burn for no reason. It didn't feel like the typical burning from when your eyes dried out. This was different. This irritation was affecting just my pupil and iris rather than the entire eye. Despite that difference, the pain increased within my eyes to where I was screaming and squeezing them shut. However, they were abruptly forced open to see blurred vision with tints of red. Eventually, a circle cleared within my vision to show my demon down in hell. He was pinned against the wall with his arms stretched full length above his head. His face showed disgust as he struggled to break free from Satan's grasp. Then, I heard the Punisher's voice speaking as the visual continued.
You had enough yet, you bitch? Fuck you, asshole. Maybe suffocating will make you think more before you talk.
After that statement, Darius started gasping for air as he was being choked without Satan touching him. Upon that sight, the vision ended and I clearly saw my guinea pig room again. My head flung back from the abrupt stop as I became scared and petrified for Darius. He was getting tortured once more by the devil and I couldn't even help him. My emotions were spiraling fast as my heart wanted to save this innocent demon. Yet I still had my conflicting morals and thoughts making me hesitant. How was I wanting to help a man who was entangled with the devil himself? I should leave him to his devices and let fate take its course. I shouldn't even be involved with the demon world. It wasn't my realm to explore or one I wanted to be in. I shouldn't even want to try and save this demon. Yet one fact still remains that made my heart feel this strongly about him. I knew he was different from the stereotype. I still didn't like the fact that he was a demon, but I somehow knew I could trust him, as crazy as that sounds. He has fulfilled his duty as a protector demon and has tried his best to protect me. That had to mean something. From there, I knew I had to try and help. Upon my final reflections, I decided to take a shot in the dark and try to teleport myself to hell. Doing this was probably going to be impossible, but it was the only idea I had. It was better than just standing around waiting for him to come back, letting my feelings spiral more. So I closed my eyes and thought hard about being in front of Darius. As a few seconds passed, I began to feel faint and fell to the ground. Remembering the feeling, I recognized that falling sensation as the air blew up, grazing every inch of my body. Soon after, I suddenly stood in front of Darius as Satan stood only a couple feet away. I caught him so off guard he abruptly stopped everything and stared straight at me. Darius dropped to the floor and kept breathing rapidly as the evil creature spoke.
What are you doing down here?
I didn't flinch back from his snarl. I did quite the opposite, surprisingly. I quickly adjusted myself to stand tall and shout angrily at him. Stop whatever you are doing to him!
Now why would I listen to a mortal like you? You don't scare me.
Because he didn't do anything wrong. That's why. I'm not trying to scare anyone here. I'm sticking up for an innocent being, doing more than what you ever do. Satan displayed a sarcastic, sad face as he continued, mocking the two of us.
Oh, how touching and insulting. The child somehow cares about a demon enough to risk her life to try and save her.
It's him, you jerk. Darius is a male and forever will be no matter what the hell you do to change him. Satan started growing angry at my outbursts. I could visibly start to see the veins pop out of his head from the fury building within him. Just as his anger level grew, mine did too. I was not allowing him to break me down this time. I stood strong as we glared at each other. For some reason, my body wouldn't allow itself to be scared when I should have been. However, I allowed myself to be reluctant as Satan decided to show authority over me.
Let's get one thing straight. If I say he's a female, then he is one. I am the one in control, not you or your stupid demon. Last time I checked, I wasn't gonna bend to a worthless human.
After his statement, he began to growl with fury, trying to intimidate me. At any other moment, it probably would have. However, the anger grew within me to make me blurt out again. Shut your damn mouth. You're not a vicious dog. He immediately stopped as he was taken aback by my comment.
What makes you think you could talk to me like that?
He angrily shouted, pushing away his confusion. Because first of all, I am a child of God, don't you forget it! His head twisted for a moment, as if he felt a strike of pain from me saying the Almighty's name. I would expect that reaction and firmly believed he burned a little from it. But it only stunned him for a brief second before he hyper-focused his eyes back onto me. Once I had his full attention again, I continued on with my rant. And another thing, I don't want to hear it anymore. All I hear are excuses coming from you, an evil dark overlord, Satan himself, making up excuses. I don't understand why you can't just leave us alone. He isn't your personal deal maker anymore. He is my protector demon, and there is nothing you can do about it, nor us. I'm sure you know that, just as well as we do. You don't need to intrude or even interfere with my life, or his. At that moment, Satan grew furious at me and decided to attempt striking fear into my heart.
Listen here, you little brat. You don't tell me what I can do and can't do. I can lay the smackdown on you without hesitation or remorse. And you know what? I think I will.
After that exclamation, he wound up his arm to swing it in motion for a slap. I flinched and crossed my arms to shield myself from his violence in response as my eyes closed in fright. The last thing I heard was Darius taking in a sharp intake of breath, grabbing a hold of my arms. My teeth clenched tightly as I waited for the impact. However, I was brought out of my stage of fright when I heard my protector demon speak.
Abby, you made a force field.
Upon that statement, I confusingly lifted my head up to find that he was right. The barrier that was suddenly surrounding us was a magenta color rather than red. That observation alone made me realize the protective opaque wall that was projected came from me. I also took note of the overflow of energy surging through my left arm that was held in front of my chest. But the main question wasn't how, but rather why. This should be impossible, right? How could a human have supernatural powers? Especially if I wasn't even dead. So as someone can imagine, the fear of randomly having the force field power scared me. Despite my negative feelings about it, I tried my best to hide it from Satan as he spoke out loud.
How are you doing that? What did you do?
I don't know. Aren't you supposed to be Mr. Know-It-All? Mr. Evil Overlord? I'm only a human.
And a naive species such as yours can't handle this sort of power.
He said, entering a rant. However, I wasn't paying that close attention to him as Darius started talking within my head again.
Abby, how did you get down here in the first place? You should have stayed put. I don't want you getting hurt again. Remember how I keep telling you to stay out of this?
Darius, I don't know how. Like I said earlier, I was upset and worried about you. I thought about the horrors of you being here in his office, and I was somehow teleported to you. Do you actually think I was truly trying to...
Are you two talking in the head?
Satan shouted in fury as he realized we were not paying attention. We both started shaking our heads to place ourselves back into reality. Before Darius could speak, I straight up started lying to him. No, we're not.
So you're purposely standing around looking like idiots while I'm talking. If that's the case, you two are dumber than a box of rocks to aggravate me like this.
With that, Satan clenched his fists together and summoned some sort of plasma ball on command. Once it was fully formed, he lifted up his arms in front of him and started to smirk.
Now, let's just see how powerful that force field is knowing a human is controlling it.
Paying attention, he used his power to hit my force field and tried to break the barrier. From the impact, I was pushed back from the amount of force. I felt the clashing of the plasma against my barrier as I kept pushing back to fight it. I needed to ensure our safety and fight for our lives. I didn't know how strong the shield was. It was turning all kinds of colors as the plasma continued to interact with it, yet it never broke. After a couple seconds, Darius spoke out to my opponent.
You're not gonna get through the barrier. It works just like my powers, strong enough to protect both of us.
At that moment, he stopped everything he was doing and almost looked defeated before he filled the air with his words again.
I'm very well aware of that now. Hence why I am so shocked.
Are you serious? How can you not know what's happening?
Darius exclaimed questionably. Satan glared at him, reacting to his response, and started throwing a tantrum.
This hasn't happened before, you useless swine! That's how! The protector child shouldn't be able to gain powers, so it's obvious that you did something to allow her to gain them.
I looked back at Darius, still holding up the force field after that statement. His face visually displayed anger while his mouth was slightly open from being flabbergasted. From just observing that face, I knew some words were about to fly out of his mouth.
What do you mean I did something? I don't even know what the hell I'm doing half the time. How could I have done something if I don't even know how to do my job properly?
Satan stood still with his fists clenched. Veins were popping out of his hands from how tightly he was tightening them, but he never spoke a word. He just stared at us with aggression as Darius continued to shout.
I am not the one who's hiding information from the other about their job. You threw me into the dark. Now you can figure this out.
At that moment, Satan growled and tightened his fists so much, I heard the cracking of his knuckles. I knew he was going to do something drastic based on his anger level. I just didn't know exactly what it was, and prayed it wasn't going to involve me.
I believe the reason is because the bond between you two got stronger somehow. The only issue is that I don't know exactly in what aspect. I'm going to guess it's because of you two being the same gender. The average protector demon grows stronger when they are paired with the same gender. So, let's just fix that right now.
And within a snap of his fingers, my force field was filled with black smoke, impairing us from seeing anything. I heard Darius grunt as he pushed me forward accidentally. I still managed to hold the force field up as I was blinded by darkness. But once the smoke finally dissipated, I saw Darius was back to normal and examining himself. He was transformed back into a male like he was supposed to be. I was extremely relieved by this. However, I knew this wasn't the time to express it. So as my demon was taking in his changes, Satan reassured himself to us.
There. That should fix things between you two.
Upon his statement, Darius and I gazed back to Satan in confusion.
First of all, how the hell did you get through her force field?
Darius asked, yelling the question in his normal voice.
One fact you might have forgotten is that I still own you. I can do whatever I please and have access to you no matter the circumstance. Regardless of her force field, if something demonic is within it, I can still change and manipulate it to my liking.
You sick bastard!
Darius said, aggravated.
Maybe that will teach you just to shut your mouth and conform to your demon role. And don't even explain to me about it being unfair. This is what you agreed to when you signed that contract with me years ago.
I never agreed to any of this bullshit when we made that deal. It was to cure my son.
Enough! I shouted, finally having enough of the arguing. I wanted to go back in my cosplay room and leave this horrible place. I didn't like arguing to begin with, but I didn't want to hear Satan's wrath and selfishness. I wasn't going to listen to it any longer, so I was going to end the interaction. We're done.
And what makes you think you can end the conversation? I am Satan, and I say this is not over, Abby.
My name flowing out of his mouth made my skin crawl and shiver. My stomach tied in knots from the thoughts of him being able to identify and address me. He was someone I didn't want to know personally and ever had to deal with. However, there was nothing I could do about it. I was just as tangled up with the devil because of Darius. Yet there was one trick I had up my sleeve to try and get us away from him temporarily. Yes, it is. And I started to think about being back in my body. With doing so, I started to feel faint and remembered the same sensations from when I was teleported down to hell. Reacting to it quickly, I swung my arm back to grab Darius, and the sudden rush of air hit us like a tornado wind to teleport us back. The feeling of flying and floating overfilled my body for a few seconds until I abruptly woke up on the floor where my body laid. As my eyes looked about the cosplay room, I was able to witness the tall male demon drop out of thin air onto the carpeted floor. I was so relieved I couldn't even describe the feeling. We were back! We made it to the familiar cosplay room. We somehow teleported back to the human world and were out of Satan's grasp. Yet I was still concerned about Darius and how he was doing. A lot of things just unfolded and my body wanted to make sure he was okay. So I quickly stood up to somewhat talk on the same level as him. As I straightened myself and faced Darius, I saw his disbelief show clear as day upon his face. I knew he had questions for me, and I also had questions for him. But this was the first actual moment where we were in mutual agreement about having a discussion. Even though we both didn't confirm to start a conversation about what happened, we knew this was the time for our questions to come forward and talk about everything. As the silence filled the air for a moment or two, Darius finally started to stutter and find the words to speak to me.
How? How did you do that?
I lifted my hands up to him in confusion as I responded with, Darius, I have no idea how I did any of that. I just got mad and thought about you. I don't know how to teleport myself, and it just happened. I feel awful about it. I didn't mean to make more trouble for you.
Abby, I don't care about that anymore.
He exclaimed, changing his expression to a softer one.
I don't care. I am just glad that you're okay.
I kept trying to catch my breath as Darius continued to stare at me. However, my body couldn't relax. I still had too many thoughts and feelings stirring that led me to ask more questions. While you were in hell, I had something happen with my eyes. I could see Satan choking you as you were pinned against the wall. What was that? How did that happen? At that statement, his face grew shocked as his eyes widened. I could see he was confused, but also knew something I didn't. So I interrupted his thought process and spoke. What's going on?
I don't know.
He stuttered.
I had that happen to me as well when you were in hell this morning. That's how I knew what he did to you without being there to witness it. What you are describing is exactly what happened to me.
After his response, I became silent to process the answer I got. I could see why Darius would have that ability with me, but why did I have it? Darius was supposed to be the one protecting me. It was a tool he could use to keep an eye on me. There wasn't a logical reason of why I would have it. I shouldn't have any magical or mystical powers or abilities involving the demon world. Why do I have powers? I asked out loud, worried. How can I have supernatural abilities in a world of dead people, Darius? I'm not dead!
I know you're not.
He said in a defeated manner.
I haven't got a clue as to why you would have powers. There was only a possibility of you having them in my body, I think. Yet, I am not sure about that either. You didn't use the power aspect within my body, so I can't give you a solid answer if that's true or not. Regardless of that theory, I don't know the reasoning behind your powers.
As I stood fearful, I gripped at my hand with dread because of what was happening to me. I somehow had a hidden power built within me when I shouldn't even have it, and it was all because of this protector demon crap. I wanted to scream with frustration, but knew I couldn't do it towards Darius. How could I yell at him if he didn't know what was going on? So instead of flipping my lid, I bit my tongue hard to stop myself and grew silent. Within that quiet session, I could see Darius trying to think. He rubbed his chin and pressed his lips together as if he was determined to reflect. Yet as he did so, I also saw he became irritated when he moved his head around. So as I continued observing his actions, he started to move his hands towards the back of his neck. "What are you doing?" I asked with confusion.
Trying to see if I can take off this stupid collar. It's literally a dog collar and it's bothering my neck. I didn't think about taking it off until now.
As he began to do just that, I heard the clanking of metal unhooking and leather unfolding as he was able to take off the collar. As it unbound from his neck, he held it in his hand for a few seconds and displayed it in front of himself. I saw how frustrated he was getting by just visually looking at it, yet I only saw it for a brief moment. For afterwards, he clenched a fist around it and threw it across the room, making it land on my desk.
There. It's off.
He said, trying to keep his composure. Yet it didn't last long when the collar suddenly flung back towards Darius. As they collided, he was knocked down and nearly slammed his head on my dresser before impacting the ground. I gasped in concern and quickly called out his name as I started to kneel on the ground next to him. I hesitated to touch his arm and help him. However, he managed to sit himself up and lean against the dresser. As he was settled, he also brought his hand up to start feeling around his neck. When he realized the collar was fastened on him again, he gave out a sigh and spoke.
Okay. That isn't going to work. That just made the collar tighter.
"Wait, it's tighter?" I asked, panicked. He then slipped one finger through the front of the collar, showing the strain of it against his neck.
I could at least fit 2 fingers underneath it before. Now I can only fit 1.
My heart started to sink as I became worried and sorrowful. It was like I was making him suffer without doing anything. I was the one who smart-mouthed and infuriated Satan, not him. Darius obtaining the collar was all my fault, and now I had to sit here and watch him pay for my mistake. As I reflected, I saw Darius close his eyes as if he felt defeated and laid his head on the bottom of my guinea pig cage. His expression made my chest fill with even greater sadness, as I knew this was all my fault. I ended up angling my head downward and turning it away, feeling guilty and ashamed. I started noticing the tears swell within my eyes and tried desperately to fight them off. However, my emotions and thoughts worked against me by continuously reminding me about the day and how this all started with me. So eventually I gave into my remorse and allowed a tear to shed. As I was trying to be discreet about my guilt, Darius must have noticed the tear rolling down my face and asked about it.
Abby, why are you crying?
Upon the question, I turned myself back to him, trying to keep my composure. But nevertheless, the tears kept flowing as the regret and sadness truly started to sink in. Because of what I did. I am practically the one who gave you that collar, and you can't get rid of it. That thing is a display of my stupidity that someone else is paying for. If I would have just kept my mouth shut, you wouldn't be in this situation. This is all my fault.
Hey, don't think like that.
He said, wiping away my tears.
This isn't your fault. Just because you spoke the truth doesn't mean that this was your doing. If Satan wasn't such a disreputable fool, I wouldn't have this either. He acts like a child and everything has to be his way. I've learned that over the years as I had to work directly with him. So please, do not blame yourself for this collar.
But you told me that it was all my fault. How can I just erase that from my memory?
I know what I said earlier about it, and I am sorry. My mind got the best of me and wasn't thinking straight. I went from being a man to a woman and didn't even know that was possible. That was an emotional overload, even for me, and I didn't want to display myself like that. But now with a clear conscience, I'm telling you that it wasn't your fault, and I'm asking for your forgiveness.
Upon his apology, I started to nod at him as he suddenly became confused. I didn't expect to catch him off guard by accepting his remorseful speech. But as I was given the wrong idea, Darius was shaking my shoulder a bit, trying to get my attention.
Abby, your phone is ringing.
He stated, raising his voice. Bringing myself back to reality once more, I quickly stood up and heard that familiar ringtone indicating an incoming phone call. As I pulled my phone out of my pocket, I looked at the user ID in shock. It was Damien. He must have been calling to check in on me. So I looked down at Darius and told him who it was before I pressed accept to answer it. Hello? I asked questionably.
Hey, Abby. I'm just calling to check in on you and Darla. From what Scarlett told me, she sounded pretty bad in the bathroom.
Oh, Damien, you're so sweet. She's all good now. Just had some sudden stomach issues. We got it figured out. As the call went on, I saw Darius stand up and start brushing his shirt off. But as he knew I was on the phone, he began to eavesdrop on the conversation by moving his right ear closer to me without invading my personal space.
Well, that's a relief. I know it was a little rocky at the end there, but I really did enjoy the meetup with you and Darla. I think we should do it again sometime soon without Scarlett. We know how much of a handful she can be sometimes, and I think it would be nice just the three of us.
I paused for a split second and stared at Darius. He was giving me a shocked look, but also slightly concerned, as his eyes were wide and his mouth was slightly ajar.
Don't you fucking dare.
he declared in my head, not saying a word out loud. However, I didn't know what to do. How could I tell Damien that he could never see Darla again? I saw no other choice but to reply differently within that moment. Yeah, that would be great. I'm sure we can find a day to meet up again. Probably not till next month, though. Darla has a life too, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. We can get more details later. I'm currently swamped at work myself for the rest of the month. It would work better that way. Thanks again, Abby. I can't wait to see you again. Goodbye.
I can't wait either. Goodbye. And I hung up the phone, almost afraid to look at the demon across from me. I only moved my eyes at first to catch his expression, and it wasn't a happy one. So as I took a deep breath, I turned myself to fully face my unenthused demon. His face displayed an aggressive, shocked expression that will always be burned into my mind. His beating red eyes were piercing right through me and striking fear into the puny human. His mouth closed tight to where it formed a hard line while he breathed hard as anger filled his body, the frustration flowing to each and every limb he had. The visual I took in made me think he was gonna shout and explode, making me cower in fear. But instead, he raised his voice in frustration to display his hidden fury as he started the conversation.
Why would you say that?
I don't know why I would say that. I didn't know what else to tell him. How could I just lie to him like that?
You have done nothing but lie to him all day about me. What makes this any different?
I understand that, but it was the only thing I could say in the moment. It would be wrong to say Darla didn't want to see him again after only meeting him once.
I'm not Darla.
He exclaimed in air quotes.
I'm not a woman anymore, and I don't plan on being one. So what makes you think you could say a thing like that?
I don't know. But if I learned anything from being with you, it's that anything can happen spontaneously. Who the hell knows? Maybe you will have that shape-shifting thing in the future. One can hope, right? At that moment, Darius was getting fed up with my nonsense and started to parent me.
You need to tell him the truth.
No! I'm not telling him about you! You seriously think it's a good idea to tell him about all the chaos and get into all the drama that has happened?
Not about me. About not going to the meetup. How do you expect me to play the role of Darla if I'm not a woman anymore? Last time I checked, I couldn't just wave my arms and change myself.
He shouted, waving his arms around, mimicking his sentence. Ironically, though, red smoke surrounded him, and that exactly did happen. After a slight coughing session from both him and I, the smoke dissipated and he appeared as a woman again. Somehow, Darius turned himself into Darla again. The only exception to the appearance was him still wearing his red silk shirt and black pants. I stepped myself back a bit in shock from what I witnessed while he realized what happened to himself. After the brief examination, Darius glared at me with confusion. He also looked to be semi-scared, though I wasn't quite sure if that was correct or not. Holy crap! How in blue blazes did you do that? I asked, amazed but yet trying to keep my tone under control.
I don't know! Don't ask me!
He cried out loud. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Everything is so randomized that we can't even... And I stopped as Darius started making noises. Focusing back on him, I saw he was spinning his head and swatting the ends of his hair away from his neck. Growing confused, I decided to ask him what he was doing. What are you doing? What's the matter?
I don't like long hair. I'm not used to it and I hate that it hits the back of my neck.
Okay, that I understand. That's why most of the time I have my hair up in a bun. I agreed, pointing to my tied-up hair. After his hair spinning episode, he started grabbing at his shirt as it appeared baggy on him. The only place it wasn't horribly loose was his chest.
Everything is so loose now.
And he let out a frustrated sigh as he brought his hands to his face. I didn't know what else to tell him at that point. All I could find myself doing was stare at him as he was frustrated again. I knew that he didn't want to be a woman, but at least he wasn't wearing those sexualized clothes like before. He actually would be comfortable with his outfit. His hair was still well kept and slightly wavy as his face glowed with beautiful makeup. His body full of curves that every guy melts for to have in their arms. A body that I wish I could have instead of this chubby one. But yet the fact was still he didn't want it. So to try and make him feel better, I decided to speak out about it. I know you didn't exactly want this to happen, but on the contrary, you look really good for being a woman. Based on his expression he gave me, I realized that wasn't the right thing to say. He lowered his hands and glared at me in annoyance.
What the hell did you just say?
He said, shocked and surprised. I continued to stare at him as I awkwardly replied again. I mean, I gave you a compliment basically calling you hot. Darius started to roll up his sleeves as he took in a deep breath to calm himself.
I'm going to pretend that I didn't hear that come out of your mouth and move past that.
Deciding to follow in his footsteps, I chose not to elaborate and keep quiet. After semi-reflecting about how awkward I made the situation, I brought a different matter to the table. So, are you going to be able to switch back? Do you even know how you did that?
You bet your ass I'm gonna try and switch back! Even if I don't quite understand how I did it before, I'm gonna try! I told you I am not staying a woman! I'm done!
He said with declaration. He then brought his hands up, like before, and paused for a brief moment. His mouth muttered something that was inaudible, but eventually continued with his task. Just like before, he waved his hands in front of himself again, initiating the red smoke. This time, though, it rose up from the ground in a swirl instead of a flash. Then once again, after the smoke dispersed, he was back to normal. As he continued to breathe heavily, I gawked at him in amazement. He randomly obtained some sort of ability that allowed him to shapeshift from male to female, and it wasn't a power that I understood. Why would he need this power being my protector demon to begin with? How was it significant? I mean, I know I said he could gain this in the future, but that was just wishful thinking. I didn't think it would actually happen. Yet upon my pondering, another important question emerged from thin air, and I decided to ask it out loud. How in the world is this possible?
I don't know,
He said, throwing his arms up in disbelief. He continued to stare at me as I reflected upon the idea of his shape-shifting. But then the entire day dawned on me, and I came up with a solution that would help us both. One that would help me stay truthful to Damien and Scarlet, while still living with a protector demon. Once the idea was fully there, I snapped my fingers and widened my eyes to display my realization. Light is beginning to glimmer. You could shapeshift into Darla and pretend to be a human still. You could walk around with me as her and protect me both in the human world and demon world.
but is that what we really want or need? You seriously want me waltzing around the human world as a girl? I certainly don't, and firmly believe that is a horrible idea. How does that seem logical to you?
I know it sounds awful, but please, hear me out. As I begged him to listen, he crossed his arms and huffed as if he didn't have a choice. So he stood with a wide-eyed stare as I continued to explain. I bet you are able to walk among humans without being detected. This could be a way to talk to me easier and protect me from every danger that could come our way. Reflecting upon it now, you have so many benefits with this power.
But what if something happens again, Abby?
He shouted.
We never know what kind of bullshit Satan's gonna pull next. I can't stop him from doing as he pleases.
I understand that, Darius. But to my knowledge, he doesn't know what the heck is going on between you and me. He didn't know about my powers and the mark that pairs us together. Plus, everything between us has been so spontaneous, just as much as Satan has been towards us. So let's take advantage of this and utilize the tools we have. I'm gonna bet you're not supposed to have that, and we should keep it silent. I ranted, trying to persuade him. At that moment, though, he continued staring at me with anger and didn't seem to be affected by my speech. His eyes intensified as I started to feel the fear rise in my body. The rise and fall of his shoulders picked up, notifying me he started breathing heavily. He closed his eyes for a brief moment and his mouth formed a hard line like before. After that exact action, Darius started to really lose his cool and exclaim his frustration.
That's the point, Abby. I'm not supposed to have this, and there is probably good reason why I don't. For fuck's sake, I didn't have any powers until I met you. I don't see why I would need to transform myself into a girl for this job. If I was uncomfortable with it when it was forced upon me, why would I use it willingly? And on top of that, why would I want to be placed in a position where I am seen as a sex toy to the world? I can't imagine women walking around and dealing with that kind of shit that I dealt with today. No one can apparently keep their damn hands to themselves anymore.
As Darius continued to express his anger, I felt as if I was watching him change. Not that he was changing into a woman again, that was for certain. It more looked like his shirt was starting to become tighter the more I appeared at it. I thought I started to see his shoulders and chest broaden in front of my eyes, but I wasn't sure. So, trying to confirm my sight, I moved my gaze to his exposed forearm. Now, Darius's arm was still muscular to a certain extent. However, I was starting to observe the muscles within his arm starting to bulk up and stick out more. From that scene, I knew my sight wasn't deceiving me. So with slight panic, I knew I had to say something to warn him of what was happening. Darius, wait a minute, I interrupted.
What?
He yelled with aggressive eyes. I grew somewhat fearful as he looked down at me. My body started to tremble slightly, but I still pressed on to notify him of his changes. I don't think you know what's happening, but your muscles are starting to grow.
What the hell are you talking about? Your vision is just fooling you because of how much I'm moving and actually expressing myself. Isn't this what you wanted? Sorry that I am just over here having problems and you're not even paying attention to my concerns. I'll just continue to bottle again like I have been and stop bothering you.
I am paying attention and I do care about you expressing your feelings and concerns. I'm trying to warn you of the situation currently happening. Stop being a stubborn ass and just listen to my warning.
I am not being stubborn. I think I would know when my body is changing. I don't need some naive 20-year-old telling me what is happening to me.
And with that, I heard Darius's shirt start to rip at the seams. I quickly stepped back as I watched the sleeves of his shirt begin to tear. I moved my eyes up to gaze at his face and saw he was finally realizing I was right. As his arms continued to grow, the buttons on his shirt broke and flung forward where I was standing. I quickly raised my arm again to block them, and the force field came up once more to surround me within it. I was obviously stunned about the barrier, but I was more focused on the muscle growth of my demon. And as everything came to a stop, I saw Darius's torso was fully exposed. The reason I say that was because pieces of his shirt were hung on his body. But they were extremely torn, as if he was in a brutal fight. He lifted his arms up to view the newer form and turned them to see every muscle. His eyes widened in utter surprise, and he glared at me, trying to find his words. So as he was stuck flabbergasted, I decided to tell him off a bit. See? I told you! I wasn't crazy, and now look what happened.
Well, what the hell is this? My shirt ripped!
After that slight yell, his muscles grew a little more, and the shirt tore again. Now, he was standing in front of me, with his torso fully exposed. Now, to be honest, I couldn't help but stare at his body and feel bad for doing so. Yet I couldn't avert my eyes from the sudden changes that were bulging out clear as day. Starting from his stomach, my eyes skimmed over his skin to find small lumps that formed an 8-pack. His chest displayed his large, broad pecs that became very defined by the pure muscle he gained, while his shoulders became thicker in size. Everything about this new form gave me bodybuilder vibes, and I didn't know how to feel about it. If any other 20-year-old girl would have seen a body like this, they would have wanted to take Darius to bed in an instant. Yet, I wasn't that kind of girl. As of this moment, I was more intrigued with his skin tone. I remembered how I could tell that his skin appeared lighter the further down it went on his body. However, instead of that, the color itself changed. As I examined it, red was the primary color showing upon his face, hands, and arms. But as the color got closer to his stomach and chest, the color changed to magenta. The two colors gradually clashed to form a radical gradient upon his body. Reflecting upon this realization, I wouldn't have expected Darius to have that kind of skin tone. As a matter of fact, I didn't think any demon would have skin like that. It was fascinating to me. But my thoughts were interrupted as Darius was trying to hide his stomach with his arms.
Why are you staring at me?
He asked, sounding defeated. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it, I replied apologetically.
I get it. I'm a freak with purple and red skin. There's a reason why I don't show it off.
As he grew angry again, the muscles started to grow slightly once more. Darius noticed the sudden growth and started to breathe heavily in panic. Yet because of his outburst, I started to understand why the muscle growth was happening. Darius, you have to stay calm, I said gently.
And how is that going to help?
I think your muscle growth is based on your emotion instead of your power. It seems to act when you get angry. So maybe to counteract it, we just need to talk about something more calming to reset your emotions. As he listened to the idea, he glared at me with confusion as if I was nuts. However, he didn't say a word and waited for me to talk. I wasn't trying to make you feel like a freak. Your gradient just caught my attention. How long have you had that? Reflecting on my question, he took a deep breath and chose to reply.
Since the beginning of this demon life. The first time I saw it, it scared the shit out of me. I didn't know if it had any secret meaning, so I asked Satan about it. But all he told me was that he couldn't control what I looked like. He could make demons out of anything, but couldn't control their features.
He actually laughed in mockery when he found out about it.
Well, I'm not gonna laugh about it. I think it makes you unique, and I like it. As Darius grew surprised, I saw the muscles on him decrease in size a bit. I started to smile, knowing my theory was correct, and knew I had to continue on with the compliments.
Really? You don't consider me a freak knowing I have this?
He asked, gesturing to his shrunken stomach. No. It is just something to semi-get used to if I ever see you like this again. This doesn't define you in any way, shape, or form. This is a part of you that no one can control. It's what makes you who you are, and I don't mind it at all. And with that, he gave me a slight smile, and his body resorted back to normal. As everything settled again, he gazed down at himself and then back up to me, realizing I somehow fixed his problem. I could still tell that he was uncomfortable as he tried his best to cover up. He grabbed the ripped shirt off the floor and wrapped it into a ball to block the view of his stomach. After that, he thanked me for helping him and apologized for his fit of rage. I gave him a nod and pulled my phone out of my pocket to check the time. It was 9:30 p.m. I was becoming tired and wanted to relax in my bed before I went to sleep. Plus, I figured Darius wanted alone time to compose himself and fix his shirt if he could. So, I started saying my goodbyes to end the night. Well, it's 9:30 and we both have had a very stressful day. I think we both need some sleep and some space to clear our heads. I'm sorry again about everything that happened, and I hope you sleep well tonight. So with that being said, I wish you good night.
Yeah. You too, Abby.
And with that, I exited the cosplay room, changed into comfy clothes, and laid in my bed until I fell asleep.
This has been Chapter 19, Hellish Behavior, from the book The Snake and the Rose. Tune into the next video for Chapter 20. Thank you for listening.